In episode 2, Joe goes to the soiree, but he's distracted the entire time. He can't get his mind off of who actually killed Malcolm. When he gets back to his apartment, he's got an invitation that was slid under the door. It says, "Your presence is requested at a night to die for," and on the back there's a QR code. The invitation, though, is just for Simon's opening night of his new show. That's it. It's hosted at the same art gallery that Kate runs. Kate is a prime suspect for obvious reasons, but when Joe sees her at the university, she's calling Malcolm, and she seems legitimately concerned that she hasn't heard from him. He wants to take her off the suspect list, but then he thinks, well, maybe she did all of that because she's smart. He realizes he's going to need some help, and even though he hates this genre, he heads to the library and checks out a bunch of Agatha Christie murder mysteries. While checking out the books, that overeager student, Nadia, walks up to him. She's excited because she loves murder mysteries. And this sparks a conversation between the two on why murder mysteries aren't the worst thing in the world. While he wants to really argue with her, Joe knows that at this moment he needs her. He pretends that he's doing a special project and just needs to better understand murder mystery novels, so she helps him with all the tropes. Number 1, there are no coincidences. Number 2, all motives always boil down to sex, money, or revenge, one of the three. And 3, the first suspect is usually the second victim. Joe stops her and says, "No, I'm thinking about just one violent murder." And Nadia says, "Well, then it's all about why that person was murdered. Somebody wanted them dead enough to plan it, then enact it with passion." He thinks about everything Nadia said, and then he thinks he's got it. He's pretty sure it was Elliot. Elliot did take his phone to, quote, put his number in it. He could have downloaded that app and just kept messaging him. So Joe decides to call Elliot up and confront him. But Elliot wasn't the guy. He has no idea what Joe is talking about. And if he's lying, he's extremely believable. After getting off the phone with Elliot, he gets a message from the murderer. The murderer comments on his brown jacket that he's wearing that day, and all of a sudden, Joe's got his head on a swivel looking around to see who might be messaging him, but he can't find anybody. The most concerning thing for Joe is the fact that this person says, "Your name isn't Jonathan Moore." And in that moment, Joe knows that he has to figure out who the murderer is before the murderer figures out who he is first. Later in the day, he heads to Lady Phoebe's apartment. He has no idea what he said to her when he was really messed up, but whatever it was, it hit, because Lady Phoebe is a massive fan of Jonathan Moore. He doesn't really want to visit Lady Phoebe, but she talks a lot. Maybe she can give up some information. When he gets to her apartment, though, he hears screaming. He rushes in, where he's surprised to find Lady Phoebe is perfectly fine. She's just going through laser hair removal, which is extremely painful. And Joe's actually fortunate, because when he bum rushed in, he almost got knocked out by Phoebe's bodyguard, Vic. Vic doesn't have the sunny disposition that Phoebe does. Also, Phoebe and Vic aren't the only ones there. Adam is also there, although he's on a, quote, business call, so he's a little distracted. Phoebe gets up and walks over to Joe and says, "What you said to me the other night, I don't know that I've ever been seen so completely. It's clear that something brought us together to be friends." And while Phoebe is praising whatever he said, Joe's trying to figure out exactly what it was. She then reveals to him that it was her that sent the invitation to Simon's art gallery show. While he really wants to come right out and say, okay, who wanted Malcolm dead, he knows that he can't. He has to put some breadcrumbs down. He throws Malcolm's name out there, and the impression that he gets is that Malcolm wasn't well liked, at least not to Phoebe. When Malcolm once again gets brought up, but this time in the presence of Adam, he also gives off a vibe of, yeah, Malcolm, I don't like him. They then notice that what Joe is currently wearing is not going to be good enough for an art gallery show. They need to do something about it. So they send Joe and Vic along with them to go to the art gallery and grab a suit. When they arrive, the art gallery isn't set up yet, and Joe catches a glimpse of Kate in the action. He realizes that she seems to be the only one out of this group of horrible individuals that actually works. He then keeps going down the hall, and he gets to the suite where they have the suits. In the suite, you've got Sophie and someone named Connie. He's known as the horse guy because he takes bets. You've also got Simon, although he doesn't talk to anybody. They start busting Joe's balls, and then he mentions that Phoebe was the one who sent him, and then they get quiet. And Joe files that little bit of information away in his head. Joe also decides to do with this group what he did to Phoebe, just throwing Malcolm's name out there, seeing what happens. And he gets an even more vitriolic response, especially from Simon. But it really is a collective. Connie mentions how Malcolm owes him 60 quid for horses. Kate walks in, interrupts the Malcolm bashing, and when she finds out that Joe has been invited, she's not too happy about it. But she says, hey, if Phoebe has adopted you, then good for you. But if you hurt her in any way, I'll cremate you. So congratulations. Joe thinks that Kate is just stressed. He doesn't even consider the fact that she's just a raging bitch. With Kate distracted, though, it gives Joe an opportunity to go searching through Malcolm's things. He grabs a key to Malcolm's office out of Kate's purse, and he heads there to just see if he can find any clues on who might have wanted him dead. Other than the booze and the scotch, he does in fact find a wad full of money, which he takes as a detective fee, and a small book that was hidden away. Most of the book is filled up with horse racing odds, but at the very back there is interesting stuff. The first thing just says, Lewis, the Sun King with dagger, Thursdays, 3 p.m. The next thing says, remember, Blue Polish Hostel - ISIS. This is a prime reason why Joe hates mysteries, because he has no idea what any of this means, but he knows that it's important. As he's leaving Malcolm's office, though, he gets caught by Nadia, who is stopping by to see if he was there for office hours. Quick thinking Joe says, oh, yeah, his girlfriend wanted me to stop by and check to see if she left her wallet in here. We're neighbors. Nadia starts up a conversation about how writing a mystery novel is going, and he admits that it's not really his thing, but he's trying not to lose hope. Because of that sentence, she realizes he's falling into a lazy narrative, making the detective all about him. She tells him, your detective has to have some kind of superpower. And this tip sets the light bulb off in Joe's head. Because he does have a superpower. He is very observant, so he starts to go around and observe the people that were at the dinner. Gemma and Blessing get taken off the list. They just don't fit the description. Adam is also pretty low on the list. After doing a quick Google search, Adam isn't exactly the black sheep of his family, but he's not the golden boy. That's his brother, who is a senator and looked at as possibly America's first gay president. Adam is looked at as kind of a screw-up. He's gotten DUIs before, but since getting together with Phoebe, he's seemed to clean up his act. And Sundry House is the first project that he's had that hasn't gone under before it even got off the ground. So would he screw that up for murder? Probably not. But while Joe is doing surveillance on Adam as Adam is sitting in a business meeting, he comes across an article where Adam was portraying the Sun King, and that rings a bell. He goes to that little book that he found in Malcolm's office, and he remembers, oh yeah, it said something about the Sun King and the dagger. He decides to follow Malcolm, and Malcolm goes in the back of this restaurant where Joe is a little horrified because Adam is getting peed on by one of the waiters. Hey, we don't kink shame on this YouTube channel. The reason why it said the dagger? Well, the waiter that's giving the golden shower has a dagger tattoo, but Joe gets caught by Vic. Vic doesn't like how nosy Joe is, and Joe has to think quickly on his feet, so he tells him he's writing a book on the rich. This works a little bit, but what really works is when he takes the money that he found in Malcolm's office and he gives it to Vic. Later that night, he heads to the art gallery show. All the press outside, though, he doesn't want to get caught and photographed by them, so he heads to the back door, where he gets let in by somebody who looks like they work there. He now thinks that maybe Adam killed Malcolm because he found out what he was up to, and he blackmailed him. It also would work because maybe Malcolm, having run out of money with his horse gambling, needed some cash, and Adam clearly has some. He's sitting there trying to make sense of it all when Kate comes up, and she is still very cold to him. Rold and Blessing show up a few seconds later, and Rold didn't get the chance to meet Joe at Sundry House, although Joe knows exactly who he is, and he doesn't like him. He wants to get out of his presence, so he starts walking around, and that's when he runs into Adam. Adam admits to Joe that he's high on Molly. He's considering buying this egg for Phoebe. And even though Adam is high, he might be able to get some information out of him. He puts a little bit of a feeler out there regarding Malcolm, and Adam opens right up, saying, yeah, look, you might want to stay away from him. He's British, and he'll be nice, but he will shake you down. He will get all up in your business. Suddenly, Joe doesn't think Adam did do it. It wouldn't make sense for Adam to kill Malcolm and then warn him that Malcolm might blackmail him. Joe then continues to walk around, look at the art. He's not really amazed by any of it until he comes across a painting of a cat, and he is amazed by the eyes. He's not the only one. So is Reese, who just so happens to be there. Reese starts making fun of the people around them, and finally Joe gets to the point where he says, why are you friends with these folks? It makes no sense. Reese chuckles and says, they were with me when I was at my lowest, so I'm loyal to them. Even to a guy like Rold. This conversation gets interrupted when that girl who let Joe in the back, she storms up and throws paint all over one of the pieces. She screamed at Simon and started cursing him out, saying, tell him what really happened. And then she's escorted out. Simon picks up the paint can, throws more paint, and acts like it's all part of the show, but it clearly wasn't. And he storms over to Kate and says, find that girl and arrest her immediately. Having seen a clue when they both walked in the door, Joe thinks he knows where he can find this girl, so he walks up to Kate and the two head over. They find her in kind of a sketchy part of town, and the girl tells them that she was an apprentice under Simon. She's the one who actually painted those cats. But what Simon did was he didn't pay her. He doped her up, making her a junkie, and refusing to actually give her credit for anything, so she ruined him. The cat in the picture was actually her aunt's cat, Isis, and Joe realizes that Malcolm was writing about her. Kate feels really bad about all this, and she cuts the girl, whose name is Blue, she cuts her a check for $3,000. Joe, though, wants to know more about why Malcolm was involved. He figures that he was going to expose Simon. So he waits for Kate to leave, and he starts chatting Blue up. She tells Joe that that was indeed the plan, to expose Simon, but all of a sudden Malcolm stopped returning the calls, vanished, so there went that plan, and she felt like she had to do it herself. Because of this, Joe is now convinced that Simon was the one who murdered Malcolm. When he walks outside to the car, he tries to warn Kate, but Kate tells him to piss off. She's not sure who he is or what his endgame with all of this is, but what she knows is she doesn't trust him. She's not very nice about it either. She reminds him that he's a hollow nobody with no life of his own. Kate then drives back separately, and it leaves Joe to have to get there on his own, but he eventually does, sitting outside and waiting for Simon to walk out so he can put all of this to an end. It's late, though. Joe kind of dozes off, and he's awoken when he hears police sirens. That's because Simon was killed. Whoever's doing this decided to take Simon out that night in the art gallery show. The next day, Joe decides to head on over to Lady Phoebe's house where they're having a quasi-wake, although no one seems all that upset about what happened. The truth is, all of them seem kind of guilty if you're looking for it. He does find out, though, that one of the things that happened to Simon was they cut off his ear. And after Malcolm getting his pinky cut off, it's clearly a trend with whoever this killer is. Adam actually brings up a really good point, that this is going to be beneficial to Kate. Simon wasn't very nice to Kate, and his parting gift for dying is the fact that his art just skyrocketed in price. It's going to make Kate a lot of money. Also kind of makes Kate a suspect in a way. He heads back to the apartment, and he sees Kate. She's on the phone, and she's talking to Blue. Turns out that Kate got Blue in a rehab. While she puts off this tough exterior, Joe can't figure out why she acts like she doesn't care about her and then foots the bill for a rehab center. But it seems like Kate is also interested in getting her art into the gallery. Joe is stuck. He needs a little bit more help, and he heads back to the library to check out more Agatha Christie, and that's when he runs into Nadia. Malcolm comes up in conversation, but it's Nadia who brings him up. Nadia had given Malcolm some of her pages to read. She wanted some feedback, and she was really upset when Malcolm just blew her off, never answering, because Nadia doesn't realize that Malcolm's dead. But because of how upset she is, it makes Joe think that maybe there was more to this Nadia and Malcolm story. Either way, he volunteers to help her out with the pages. It's something that Nadia really, really appreciates. After checking out the books, he heads home, and it's his worst nightmare waiting for him. Somebody broke into his apartment, printed out all of the news stories of everyone he's ever killed, and put them on his wall. Then he gets a message that says, "I found you. Hello, Joe." Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.